Well, happy Friday to you. It is Geospatial 2.0 Friday talk time. Beautiful time of the year. It's just entering the autumn here in Utah. The leaves are changing color. It's one of my favorite times. I'm a guy that loves the snow, so I'm anticipating a good snowy winter this year. Fingers crossed. Anyway, this Friday's talk is what is at the heart of Geospatial 2.0. Let us explore. So I like that picture actually. It's a think box, but I'm using it in a different way here. We have a tendency to have our heads in boxes, I always feel. I'm not sure if that's an unnatural or natural tendency for us to be in that place where we fear change and we're really not looking around at alternatives. I'm generalizing, but we all have a tendency to live within our own skill sets and our own base of understanding and fear moving beyond that. So that was then. I'm fearing it by saying at the top there, this is actually now. In last week's Friday talk, I spoke about some of the innovations that are going on the technical side. I spoke about INSAR and radar. I spoke about satellite imagery and LiDAR. But those are actual disciplines that sort of live in their own place at the moment. Those are experts at radar are different to those that are experts in the satellite imagery world, are different to those guys that work in the 3D world. So we live in these narrow places where we have our particular areas of focus and expertise. We struggle from a technical side of things to widen our understanding of other technologies. And I'm not blaming technologists for this. There's a reason why you guys are not connected, but we live in a world that's separated. I'm going to talk about selling as well, because part of the geospatial conversation is not just about the technology. It's also about the conversations we have to actually talk about the value of geospatial. Now, I'll go back a while. I remember working with a chap that he'd come from a technical background, but he really kind of was a widget salesman. And we talk about consultative selling now. Well, there was an example that this chap, and it wasn't his fault. He didn't have the training. This was the problem. He actually went into a CIO of a public company and did a very sort of cool demo and then asked the guy, would you like to buy this 3D digital reality toolkit? Needless to say, it didn't result in a sale, and needless to say it didn't help any future conversations with that CIO. We still have a tendency to live in a world where the sales process is seen as widget selling. Highly problematic. Let me put one other thing down there on the selling side of things, and this was a tweet that I put out, or a thought that I put out in LinkedIn the week before last, and I'll read it to you. If I see one more GIS sales pitch in social media, I'm going to scream. Treat social media like a party, discussion, relationship building, shared purpose. Try to engage me in your product promotion, I'm gone. It was a bit hard hitting that and a little bit direct, but I tend to see social media used in a completely inappropriate way. It's a sales pitch in too many times, and particularly in LinkedIn, we see that far, far too often. So I've got there, that was then. In reality, we're still in that place, but I'm hoping that we're moving out of that place. So let's answer the question then, what is at the heart of Geospatial 2.0? Now, one of my colleagues, Bruce Butts, and I were chatting about this yesterday. There's this whole notion of personal brand, and we were thinking through what actually is a personal brand. And I'm not going to cover personal brand in this talk, but I did want to touch on it. To me, a personal brand is something that's deep inside of you. It's something that's very meaningful to you. It's beyond work. It's actually a part of your sort of your DNA. And in my case, I've always tried to think differently and act differently. And sometimes that's got me in trouble, particularly when I was a younger guy. But I think that if one looks at one's journey, there are some folks that see things slightly differently. And I think that's really at the heart of Geospatial 2.0, and really what I suppose ultimately I'm sort of driving through with the discussion on Geospatial 2.0 it's really beginning to widen your perspective and not just live in those narrow places, to actually take that box off of your head and start looking a little bit more widely. And I encourage folks to do that. That's exactly why I post the different things about the technology. I try where I can to talk about new things that are happening in the business world, just things that are different, and get people to start thinking and talking differently about things. Right or wrong, it's a conversation, and it's a different conversation to the one that we've been having. So let me move to that. And actually, this thought of the day was the reason why I'm doing this Friday talk. I sat on a talk this week which was really interesting with a group of GIS folks, and I was really just a fly on the wall listening. And again, that word map kept coming up. But it really struck me that what was different about Geospatial 2.0 at its very heart is what I've described in this little thought of the day. And I'll read it to you. GIS is one part of Geospatial 2.0. Why a smaller part of a bigger whole? 2.0 takes a geospatial data first perspective. 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, whereas GIS still has a map first perspective. It really struck me that people on that call were thinking and talking about where they can apply maps. And it was a map-led conversation. And every part of the process that was being explored within that conversation was really centered around a map. And to me at that moment, I had that aha that that's really not what 2.0 is about. A map is certainly potentially one output, but there are many other things that are potential outputs from those core data sets. And again, I harp on those core data sets. Clearly, we don't talk to customers about data. We talk to customers about outcomes. But the outcomes are driven by the data that we're using. The stuff in the middle, the platform, we use any platform. I think I mentioned that last week. It doesn't really matter. It fits with what needs being solved. But data's at the heart of what we do. It isn't a map. So 2.0 really ultimately is about a geospatial data-driven conversation. And that's what makes those things quite different. So I'll finish on what I often finish with. If one thinks about data-driven processes, one needs to tell data-driven stories. That's really translating what's a workflow in the analog world, what folks do in the real world, to things that we can help them do within computer systems. So that's the data that we store, that's the processing of the data, the analyzing the data, and the visualization and interaction with that data. And again, I'm harping on old themes, but I really think this is at the core of what this encapsulates everything that we're talking about here. This encapsulates the business parts of GIS 2.0 and the technical parts of 2.0. Two-dimensional maps, historically the place of GIS, is about patterns. 3D is about sense of place. That is what is there now and what could be there. And then the fourth dimension, which is change. So that's sort of real-time data, things that are happening now at this very moment. And that could be things that are moving, that could be things that are stationary, but getting a real-time feed. So that's all about change. So those are the themes really that tie together everything we're talking about in the Geospatial 2.0 world. If we narrow our thinking into boxes and we only focus on one part of that story, then we're missing the complete story. So that was it. If you've got comments, thoughts, disagree, agree, reach me at Critigen, matt.sheehan at critigen.com, and we will do it again next week. Enjoy this beautiful autumn weekend. All the best.